Black History Month 2015. The Race Relations Act 50 years on. Baroness Lawrence of Clarendon OBE. Question time facilitated by Professor Christine Maggs. Professor Maggs and Baroness Lawrence are at the front of a lecture theatre.
I've got some questions that the audience have passed on. So what we're going to do is, the questions have been anonymised, and I'm going to read the questions on behalf of the audience members. So the person who posed the question will know who they are, but the Baroness will not respond to you in person, but to the questions. So the first question is, do you think this generation of young black people have a strong and represented voice? Is institutional racism still a prevalent aspect in today's Metropolitan Police?
To say that they have a strong voice, I don't think that they have. I think for young people, especially where the police is concerned, their voices never seems to get out. And the fact that they stop and search stuff and nobody listens to how they've been stopped, how they've been treated. So their voices are very limited. So what's the other part of the question?
The second part is institutional racism still prevalent in today's Metropolitan Police?
I presume you're saying some instances it is. I know that the police have learned a lot and we've moved a long way. But if you look at the statistic about how many people are still stop and search within the black community, you think nothing has moved on. I've always said that I've sat in meetings with senior officers and I believe that they get it. I think that they really understand around racism and what it is that needs to be done. But they're not the ones who are on the beat. They're not the ones who have encounter with the members of the public. And until you start having officers who encounter the public on a day-to-day basis, until they understand how their relationship with the public is so disaffected that they're not being able to communicate the way in which they should. And I think until that happens, then you will always have. And I know we all want to move forward. We all want to say that, we want to sort of tick the box to say racism no longer exists. But I think, and until those massive changes happen, then we're not going to be able to do that.
Thank you. So if an occurrence similar to what happened to your son happened today, do you feel it would be handled in the appropriate manner?
I think in some ways I've learned their lesson. It reminds me of when Anthony Walker was killed. And it was a completely different way in which the police approached the family. And it just the whole thing around it was so much different. Mind you, there's a bit that they made sure that no other organisation or outside interests got close to the family. Whereas when Stephen died, after people which had no idea who they were anyway, but they were there to support. With Anthony Walker, I remember his mum saying to me how great the police, and the work that they've been doing. And to that respect, yes, they have been, but they isolated the family, so the support that they could get from the community, they didn't have that. And I thought that was quite a shame. So would it be different from when Stephen was killed? Yes, I believe it's different, but they're trying to more control the family so that you don't get any outside interest. But as a family, you do need to have that. You need to have the support of the community. So they have to be able to balance that to make sure the family is not isolated.
Okay, so institutional racism is a concept that you've discussed there. What would you like to see in future in relation to race-related crime and the justice system?
Is that one of the things that really has bugged me is how they, when the knife attacks and stuff, they call it black on black crime, and they have a special unit that sets up to deal with that. For me, a crime is a crime. It doesn't matter who commits the crime. And I think that, I mean, so it's very few of those crime has been solved. But if you to look at it that we all live in this one society, so to try and separate us and keep us, for us to see ourselves as different, then if you understand, you're always going to have this. To me, we live in one society. I can't walk down the street and thinking I'm the only black person that's walking here. We have a variety of people, so we should be able to live and be treated in that way. And until that happens, we will still have how crime is treated. As I say, don't call it black on black crime. A crime is committed, somebody's died, a family's suffering, then we need to look at that and not separate it.
Right, so we'll move on to something a little lighter. What do you hope to achieve as a Baroness of the House of Lords? You've been voted the most powerful woman in Britain. Do you agree?
I've always, whenever anybody says that to me, what are they talking about? It's not me. I said, my thing is, when I accepted to go into the House of Lords, I think over the years, I have shown to people that I don't look at myself as this great who I am type of person. Everything I've done, in fact, most of the things I've done over the time, it doesn't benefit me or my family, it benefits others. And so I feel that at times I've always had to speak for other people more so than myself. When I sat in meetings around with police officers or even with government ministers, I always bring to them what people within the community say and what their experiences are. Because if they can't be in the room, and so they can't present to the police officers or to ministers, this is what's happening to me within my community. So I've always tried to do that. I've always brought other issues and other people's things. And I see myself as sitting in there. I'm still a little bit shy when it comes, if you see how other peers, how they are in there, I'm still trying to find my feet to say things that I feel that people are not addressing. You know, sometimes I listen in there and it's like the debate happened on Monday. People seem to forget is around the tax credit. But what people are focusing on is the fact that House of Lords is unelected and how dare they vote down what the government, they've had 3 votes and they've passed it. What we're in there to do is to represent members of the community. We're there to speak up, we're there to be their voices. And if we forget to do that, then there's no point in us being there. So that's one of the things I kept saying, this is what I want to do. So whenever I have an opportunity to speak, that is what I talk, that's how I speak, is on behalf of others who don't have a voice and they don't have the opportunity of sitting there and questioning the ministers. We never give you the straight answers anyway, but you can only try.
Right, well, thank you very much for giving us straight answers so far. So what do you think of the way in which this generation of young people interact with the police force? And if any, what improvements can be made in that interaction?
In some cases, I know in some forces they're trying to get out into schools, they're trying to have officers there so young people can get an opportunity to see them on a daily basis and to be able to interact with them. And I think they need to do a lot more of that. I think they're very good at doing it in primary schools because I think they probably feel more comfortable in primary school because they won't be challenged as much. And they need to be, you know, that needs to happen more because once they put the uniform on, they become completely different people. And there's no need for them to, because I think you should be a part of the community, whether you have a uniform or not. But officers, once the uniform is on, they're completely different. And they don't seem to be able to relate to people on a one-to-one or in a group as they should. And that's what I'd like to see police officers need to do. And then that way, with young people, you find that you'll be able to have that interaction with them. You know, because what they seem to forget, we all were young at one time, or we didn't act in a way in which our adults act. And so it's to remember that, you know, they're still developing, they're still growing. So there's sometimes you need to allow them and give them some slack. So they could be rowdy. It doesn't mean they're doing anything, but just where they are boisterous. They're playing around with their friends. They're doing, but it doesn't mean that they're into anything that's bad. And I think, especially with young black men, the minute they see a group of these kids just hanging around on the streets or wherever, they automatically think they're up to something. And that shouldn't be the case.
So you've achieved an awful lot in different areas, including the creation of the charity in memory of your son, Stephen. For an individual unaware of your work and its breadth, how would you define what you've been attempting to achieve overall?
I think where the trust is concerned, you've only have to probably to go on the trust website, and you'll see the amount of young people, especially through the architectural side of things that we've done. So, I mean, so I've lost count now. I mean, so we used to say there's probably about 9 or 10 who are qualified. I'm sure that there'd be much more than that. And, you know, over the years, we've not only just worked in this country, but we've had students in Jamaica and in South Africa. And it was important for me is to, because I think when somebody has been supportive towards you or allowed you to achieve certain things, is to give something back. And so Jamaica, of course, is where I was born and where Stephen's buried. And he went there when I think he was about 4, and he loved it. And so he's buried next to my grandmother. And so it's to give the opportunity to young people from Jamaica and other to support them in studying architecture. South Africa, behind that, it was because if we had met with Nelson Mandela on the 6th of May, you know, he's speaking out about that. He knows that black lives are cheap in South Africa. He did not expect it in this country. Now, had he not spoken out, the arrest that took place the following day would never have happened, because police, they had information to arrest, but they chose not to. So for me, it's giving something back. And so we've supported young people in South Africa to become architects.
Thank you. So you were elevated to the House of Lords in respect to the charitable work you've done over the last 2 decades. What have you achieved so far since you've been in the Lords, and what do you hope to achieve in the future?
I think it's difficult to say what I've achieved so far. I think I've made contribution. So in some of the Hansard, you see some of the things I've done. I've sat on, in fact, it was something that Sadiq Khan from the Labour Party wanted myself, Keir Starmer, who was the DPP, the Director of Public Prosecution, and Peter Nearwood. He was once in the National, I can't remember what the NPIA stands for now. And so for us to look at a victim's law, because we all know, as for those who are victims, it's always very difficult if you go to court what support you get, the police what support you get from there, and from the lawyers what support you get. So the idea is to have like a one-stop shop, that, you know, sometimes not everything that needs to go to court, so you could probably get somebody to support you, you know, that's for you to understand what has happened to you, and also when you get to court. So we had a 18 months group where we brought in people who has been supporting people either doing domestic violence, racism, and so we brought all of these people to sort of give us some feedback what it is that they're looking for to happen out in the public domain. So I worked on that with Keir. So Labour did not win the election, because had they won the election, that would be part of their policy that they'd be putting in. And what I tried to make sure within those meetings, that whatever that we did, it would be across party. So it doesn't matter who was in power. It's something that they all could do. So I'm waiting for Keir to put a motion down in the House of Commons for us to try and take that forward. So that's what I in the past 18 months or so that I was doing. I am now about to, in fact, the first meeting is today, which I should have been, but I was planning to be here. I'm going to be sitting on the Joint Committee for Human Rights. And that's, as I said, today's the very first meeting, because meeting's been cancelled, so today should be the first meeting. So I'll be sitting on that. I've also just agreed to sit on for architecture, because I feel that as an organisation are trying to support young people into that profession, and that's been run in the House of Lords, so I think it's something I should get on. They talk about the RIBA, because there's a Stephen Lawrence Award that happens at the Sterling every year, and now it's a second award that happens, so everybody looks forward to that. So, you know, they talk about the RIBA around their diversity. And I feel if it wasn't for the trust, how we've been working with them over the years, they would have no diversity to speak of. Because I've been to so many meetings, events, and when I sit there and look, I'm not an architect. And sometimes you may count 1 or 2 people in the room of hundreds, so that needs to change. So I think I'll be able to lend my voice there and give some support so we can make some changes.
Thank you. We're going to move on to something completely different now. What is your view towards the reparation discussions put forward to the British government by Jamaica?
Yeah, so when I heard that, I just think, for God's sake, they talked about building prisons. You know, Jamaica, you know, like a lot of the Caribbean country, you know, this country has taken so much away from these countries. What they should be doing is looking around what social input they could do around housing, jobs, creation. You know, prison, what did I say? Because they want to send all the prisoners back who are Jamaicans back to Jamaica. You're going to put millions of pounds into that. Okay, the prison may be really bad and need upgrading and that. But is that what it's all about? What about the ordinary people out there who need jobs? You know, schooling. And those are the sort of thing I think the country should be looking, this country should be looking to put in there. Not talking about prisons. Sorry.
And do you feel that religion and education mix, or should educational establishments be strictly secular?
My grandchildren goes to a church school. So for me to say that it should be, I think each one has their role. And I've always supported a church school because I go to church and I feel that I want my children to be brought up in a Christian way. So I would always support that. You know, everybody's different, and I don't think I'd like to say, well, I don't think, you know, everybody should go to a church school or nobody should. I think it's up to the individuals what they want.
Right. The final question on our list is about domestic violence, and it specifically refers to the local area, which clearly you won't know very much about. But your questioner believes that white women in relationships with black men are more likely to get the domestic violence allegations investigated than if their partners were white. In other words, there's a racism in the way that domestic violence is investigated, specifically by the Dorset Police.
I think when I saw that, I just think you've got enough people here from the police and from the, and so I think the question should be aimed at them, you know, because, you know, I just say I don't know the area, and I know domestic violence because after I finished my degree, I worked supporting women in domestic violence. I know how important it is about the support, and, you know, so I think that as an area, I just think it's something that you should be listening to what the community is saying to make sure you give them support that they need, and the violence that the women are suffering or the men who are suffering, that, you know, where arrest that needs to be made, it needs to happen. And for me, it doesn't matter what colour of skin you are, if you're experiencing those sort of violence, and that is what it needs to be dealt with. And I think we have enough people and they're the ones that should be listening and making sure that whoever put the question should be able to go and talk to them and to see how best that you can help and support, you know, in those areas of crime.
Well, I'm sure we'd all like to thank the Baroness very kindly for doing those really honest and helpful answers.
A caption lists a number of sponsors for the speech by Baroness Lawrence. If you would like to find out more about the dignity, diversity and equality work at Bournemouth University, please contact Dr. James Palfreman K by emailing diversity@bournemouth.ac.uk. We also have Facebook, Twitter and Instagram accounts.